party. Yeah. All right. Thank you for bearing with us. Just on the health front and Lebanon, of course, the World Health Organization tells us that they and their partners are continuing to support Lebanon's health system by providing medical supplies and technical assistance. For its part, the World Food Programme is scaling up its emergency food assistance to reach up to 1 million people impacted by the current crisis. The World Food Programme has also been working with donors and partners for several months to stockpile food supplies in strategic areas. Also, our World Food Programme colleagues are actively supporting vulnerable Syrian refugees and the most at-risk Lebanese people in Lebanon. Unfortunately, as Mr. Lacroix just said, funding shortfalls at one point in the beginning of the year made it necessary to reduce food assistance to those who need it the most. Also, UNHCR tells us that they and their humanitarian partners are scaling up their efforts to assist both Syrian and Lebanese families crossing the border. And in such circumstances, as you well know, women and children are bearing the brunt of this conflict. That's why our colleagues at the UN Population Fund are supporting 17 safe spaces for women and girls across Lebanon. And our humanitarian coordinator, Imran Riza, who leads the humanitarian response for Lebanon, spoke today about how he deplores the dangerous escalation, saying that some of the attacks that we have seen that disrupt the delivery of essential services, delay life-saving medical care, and violate people's fundamental rights to access health care must not happen. Also, turning to Gaza, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us they're very concerned about the toll of repeated airstrikes on shelters for displaced people in the Strip. In recent days, at least 6 schools serving as shelters for displaced people have been struck. That's in addition to a deadly strike on Al Amal Institute for Orphans yesterday, which has also been serving as a shelter in the west of Gaza City. Once again, OCHA stresses that international humanitarian law demands that the parties take constant care to spare civilians from harm. Civilians must be protected and their essential needs must be met. OCHA tells us that our humanitarian partners are continuing to provide treatment to malnourished children in Gaza despite the limited entry of critical supplies and the loss of access to some of the humanitarian warehouses. Even in the face of these challenges, humanitarian partners screened more than 24,000 children in Gaza for malnutrition last month alone, bringing the total screened since mid-January to nearly 319,000 children under the age of 5. This includes more than 70,000 children in Gaza's northern governorate. All screened children, nearly 22,000 have been diagnosed with acute malnutrition. In September, nearly 50,000 children under the age of 5, as well more than 18,000 pregnant or breastfeeding women received supplementary feeding. However, OCHA warns that partners have limited ability to store supplies that require refrigeration. In September and to date, World Food Programme reached nearly 900,000 vulnerable people in Gaza and in the West Bank, including more than 688,000 in Gaza alone. This is significantly below the usual number of people reached by the World Food Programme as a result of Israeli-imposed bureaucratic hurdles, lack of security guarantees within Gaza, and insufficient border crossing points. Forced population movements have also disrupted the capacity of partners to maintain operations and distribute items, including food, to those who are in need of it. The World Food Programme provided over 9.4 million hot meals through a network of 72 community kitchens, and through that they reached 186,161 people in September. While hot meals and the distribution of fresh bread through bakeries continues, WFP will no longer distribute food baskets through its general food distributions across Gaza in October, as the flow of essential goods has been critically restricted. And in the West Bank, we and our partners are gearing up to support Palestinian farmers during the annual olive harvest. OCHA and its partners warn that access restrictions and widespread settler violence pose high risks and challenges for these farmers, potentially undermining their livelihoods. At present, more than 9,600 hectares of olive cultivated land remain unharvested because of access restrictions. The result has been the loss of estimated 1,200 metric tons of last year's olive oil harvest. This morning, back here, just across the hall in the Security Council, James Swan, who is the acting special representative for Somalia and head of the UN assistance mission there, briefed the council on the situation in Somalia. He pointed out that while making commendable efforts to sustain military operations against al-Shabaab, Somalia is at the same time tackling the challenges of force generation, taking over security responsibilities from the African Union transition mission in Somalia, planning the transition to the proposed African Union support and stabilization mission in Somalia, and implementing crucial stabilization programs in recovered areas. He said the UN continues to support the federal government on these activities, working closely with the African Union and other partners. Mr. Swan added that Somalia's humanitarian and development challenges are intensified by climate shocks, warning that scarcity of resources and displacement communities are in turn driving conflict. He stressed that building greater resilience to the effect of climate change is essential for Somalia's stability. Turning to Ukraine, Matthias Schmale, the humanitarian coordinator in that country, was in Kharkiv yesterday, on the same day that an attack on an apartment block injured civilians. Mr. Schmale stressed that we must do everything possible to ensure that the war in Ukraine is not normalized and that civilians and civilian infrastructure are protected. This is especially important given the repeated attacks on energy facilities with winter fast approaching. Our humanitarian colleagues noted that there were more than 50 attacks in Kharkiv last month, injuring more than 190 people, including children. This is according to the authorities there. Meanwhile, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that hostilities in the frontline areas of Donetsk and Kherson regions yesterday and today also reportedly result in dozens of civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure. Humanitarian workers delivered assistance to those people in need in those areas. And also want to flag the continued issues of challenges of flooding in West and Central Africa. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that floods have reached catastrophic level with more than 5 million people in 16 countries impacted so far this year. Chad, Niger, and Nigeria are among the hardest hit, being home to more than 80% of people affected. At least 740,000 people have been displaced and hundreds of thousands of homes, more than 100 schools, and dozens of health facilities have been damaged. Nearly 500,000 acres of farmland have also been affected. Without sufficient support, the flood threatened to hinder the reopening of schools, with new school year set to begin this month. The floods could also aggravate existing food insecurity, particularly in Chad as well as in Niger. The precarious living conditions of people affected by the floods also increase the risk of waterborne diseases, such as cholera, which is spreading in many regions of Niger and Nigeria. Humanitarian partners are mobilized and are supporting the response, including in food and health assistance, but efforts are limited due to financial resources or lack thereof. In that vein, Joyce Masuya, our acting emergency relief coordinator, has allocated $35 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund for flood relief in Chad, in Niger, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the Congo, but more money is needed. A quick note from Abyei, where our colleagues there are reporting that the peacekeeping mission and the UN country team have intensified their efforts to support communities following heavy rains that caused flooding. According to OCHA, more than 18,000 people in Abyei have been impacted or displaced by the floods. Within Abyei are facing critical situation compounded by existing food insecurity and disease outbreak. Colleagues from the UN peacekeeping mission have constructed 4 channels in Abyei town to facilitate the water flow and help those trapped by floodwaters to move to safety. They're also rehabilitating roads to improve access to humanitarian assistance and enable displaced families to return to their homes. Additionally, the peacekeeping mission is distributing essential supplies to those in need, and those supplies include food, they include mosquito nets, clothing, hygiene product, and we continue to foster dialogue with local women. And in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the peacekeepers there tell us they've deployed a patrol to the villages of Jisa and Okapi, which is in southeast Jugu in Ituri province. This followed reports of gunfire from members of the Zaire militia, and we can also tell you that those militia members withdrew following the arrivals of UN peacekeepers. The mission also sent night patrols to protect civilians in response to an alert received by a potential attack of the Codeco armed group, also in the Jugu area. And the peacekeeping mission, in coordination with the UN Mine Action Service and the Congolese armed forces, conducted an operation to clear unexploded ordnances from Rumoka, northwest of Goma. And winter is oncoming, so this could be important. The World Meteorological Organization and the International Ski and Snowboard Federation have announced a new partnership that will, among other things, highlight the harmful effects of climate change on winter sports and winter tourism. This is the first time our colleagues at WMO have partnered with the Sports Federation. In addition to working together to highlight the impacts of rising global temperature on snow and ice cover, the collaboration will aim to establish practical initiatives to strengthen scientific and sporting dialogue. More information online. Two more notes quickly. Senior personnel appointment. The Secretary General announced the appointment of Madalena Sepulveda Carmona of Chile as Director of the UN Research Institute for Social Development, otherwise known as UNSRISD. Ms. Sepulveda succeeds Paul Ladd of the United Kingdom, to whom the Secretary General is grateful for his dedicated service and leadership of the Institute. The Secretary General also wishes to extend his appreciation to Katja Hujo, Senior Research Coordinator, who will continue to serve as the acting director of the Institute until Ms. Sepulveda assumes her position. She is currently the executive director of the Global Initiative for Economic, Social Rights, and senior researcher associate at UNTRISD. Why do you come here? You come here to learn, and I like to teach. And we also like to thank. So, money from a member state. Maggie, I'm looking at you. That's a good thing. We just got money from a member state which boasts the largest mangrove forest in the world. It's the UNESCO protected reserve forest. What country could that be? What? No. Okay. So what country did you say? Bangladesh. Yes. The name of the forest is Sundarbans Reserve Forest. Did you also know that Bangladesh has the third longest beach in the world, around Cox's Bazar? What?
I wish you led with this.
It's exactly. Some people are more into mangrove forest, others into beach time.
This one has been the longest one is in my hometown.
Yes, and what is the name? What is the name of that beach?
Casino.
Yes, and what's the second largest beach in the world? Yes, and what is it called? The 90-mile beach. And hopefully it is 90 miles, but you never know. Okay. Anyway, Errol, please. Congratulations. Now, Maggie, were you trying to jump the line? Errol, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. Gabriel.
Thanks, Steph. Speaking of senior personnel appointments, when do you expect we'll hear something on Martin Griffiths' replacement? Break some news
So, no,
right now?
I think the wheels are turning, and we hope to have something soonish.
Earlier this morning, the E10 were at the stakeout, and they, among other things, voiced their support for the Secretary General and the UN system. What is the Secretary General's reaction?
Thank you.
All right. Number three is, last one is, you mentioned 6 schools that have been turned into shelters that were struck in the last several days, including a school that housed orphans. Struck by who?
We believe it was from Israeli fire. The name was the West Orphan School. I don't know if it's still a center for orphans, but it is a shelter.
And is the Secretary General concerned, or should I say, how concerned is he with all of the attention, or much of the attention right now on Lebanon, Iran, Israel, of course, that there are still people being killed every single day day in Gaza?
Listen, from our part, we are continuously doing our best to keep every humanitarian crisis in the world up front and center. That's our job, that's our advocacy job. All the people who are suffering, all the civilians who are suffering deserve the world's attention. It is in part also the responsibility of the media to make sure that people's voices are heard. From our part, we will do whatever we can. It is clear and it is concerning that as there's a multiplication of crises, new ones are created and old ones are not solved, right? And so we need to keep our eye on all the balls that are currently in the air. Yes, Madame Georgia.
Thank you, Stéphane. On the informal meeting or dinner between the Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot leaders, has the date been finalized?
Yes, the date is October 15th, and obviously we'll share more information with you as we get it, but the dinner right now the informal dinner is right now being planned for 15 October.
Thank you.
Maggie, you may speak.
Thank you. Yesterday, I believe you mentioned that some money had come in for the flash appeal for Lebanon, and you said you were going to get back to us with numbers. Do you have any
I
today?
do not have those numbers, unfortunately.
Okay,
but I'll
and
see if we
then
can-
I asked you Tuesday about if WHO, if one of the things they can
Yeah.
send to Lebanon is blood.
I thought you had received the answer on that.
I didn't unless I missed it. but-
Okay,
if
I
you
read
have
it,
that would be
but I
helpful.
forgot what the answer was because it was 2 days ago.
Okay.
But I will recycle the information that we
Thanks.
received. Okay, I think on that note, halas, see you tomorrow.